So what of the future for SEAT? Well, you only have to look at this huge new plant under construction here at Martorell, about 20 miles west of Barcelona, to realise the sheer scale of Volkswagen's commitment. They're spending well over £1 billion here to create one of the most highly automated, highly robotised car plants in the world. But even so, despite the immense improvements in productivity and build quality, I think there still has to be a question mark over whether SEAT is in a position, more than any other car maker in Europe, to repel the huge influx of low-priced, high-quality cars from Japan that were flooding here after 1993. Mind you, that having been said, Japan so far has made very little impression on the Spanish market. They've got about 1%. Nissan is the most popular, and they're lying 16th in about the same position as Lada. Nissan, in fact, are the only Japanese company presently making cars here in Spain. They've got a small plant building off-road four-wheel drive cars. That, of course, is a sector that's fiercely competitive all the way across Europe. Fortunately, Land Rover is in there doing brilliantly with the Discovery, now challenging the Shogun in the medium price sector. So what have Mitsubishi come up with in response? Well, Jeremy Clarkson has been out here in Spain finding out.
This is the countryside. Now, if you want to be mobile out here, you need one of these. Or better still, one of these. And for a townie like me, choosing between the two is not difficult. The old Mitsubishi Shogun earned itself a fine reputation as the best mid-range off-roader you could buy. But that was before Land Rover launched the new Discovery. To meet this strident new challenge, Mitsubishi has completely reworked the Shogun to end up with this. To help it off-road, it has 8 inches of ground clearance, crawler gears for tackling steep gradients, and 2 locking differentials, which, let me tell you, in conditions like these can be pretty essential. There are also shorter overhangs to make life that little bit easier when attacking a sharp ridge. Certainly there was nothing on this fairly arduous off-road course near Granada that caused the new car to raise a sweat. But even if something had broken, this, like all Mitsubishis, comes with a 3-year warranty. Now, all dual-purpose vehicles of this type have to walk a fine line between off and on-road ability. Make them good out here and they'll be bouncy on the road. Tune them for the road, and out here you'd be better off with the horse. The old Shogun walked that line very well indeed, but the new one does it even better, and this is due in part to a clever new 4-wheel drive system. When you've finished fiddling around in the woods, all you need to do is move this lever into road mode and drive to the front wheel stops. To confirm that's happened, there's a few little lights on the dashboard. You don't even have to slow down, let alone stop, as you do in other cars of this type. And when just the rear wheels are being driven, noise, fuel consumption and wear are all reduced. If you want to save a few more pennies, you can go for the good old 2.5-litre turbo diesel, but if you subscribe, as I do, to the American view that there ain't no substitute for cubes, boy, by which I think they mean bigger engines are better, you'll go for this 3-litre V6. Not only has it got the power to uproot a giant redwood, it's also very quiet, very relaxed cruising companion. It even sounds very sporty as well. That sportiness isn't just pleasing to the ear either. The handling for such a top-heavy car on what has to be long travel suspension is very good. And thanks to the fitment of tyres which are more suited to the M1 than a peat bog, grip isn't lacking either. See what I mean about the noise? Good, isn't it? Anyway, couple all this lot to sensibly weighted power steering, throw in optional anti-lock brakes, and you have a pretty fair imitation of a normal saloon. Having said that, the high driving position and £18,000 price tag do serve as reminders that you're in something special. Overall, though, your granny could take this to the shops with no problem at all. The Shogun may be very car-like to drive, but there's no mistaking its off-road origins when you're in here. Yes, there's lots of toys, but it's a bit plasticky, and there are all sorts of crazy knobs and dials. Craziest of the lot must be the altimeter, but the compass and the inclinometer run it a close second and third, I reckon. That sort of flamboyance is translated to the exterior, which has lost some of the old model's rustic charm. Thanks to its gaudy paint job and flared wheel arches, I have to say this model I think would be rather more at home outside a wine bar than in the paddock of a point-to-point. Now this is the short wheelbase three-door model. It's not the most practical car you're ever going to come across. It's very difficult to get into the back, and once you're there, there's not a lot of space. The boot's pretty tiny too. But it is very trendy. It'd be great for posing around town, and I must confess, I'd rather like one. Also be terrific for a dirty weekend. But if you want a dirty weekend of an entirely different nature, you're better off with one of these. Now, it's got exactly the same engine options and trim levels, but it's 2 feet longer and it's got 5 doors. Now that means there's room enough in there for 7 seats, but of course you can fold all those away, and then there's room enough for the kitchen sink. Now on this showing, the horse has pretty much had it, but more important than that, Land Rover had better watch their backs as well.
Jeremy Clarkson there. And this car also perhaps is well described as a British success story now under immense pressure from the competition. The XJS, of course, has been around much longer than the Discovery, in fact since 1975, with very few changes from Jaguar, mainly because they couldn't afford them. In fact, it's become something of a minor classic in its own lifetime. But now they've scraped together £50 million for a much-needed update. Although, unless you're an XJS addict, it's quite difficult to see where they've spent the money. Not so much a facelift, you might say, more of a tail lift. Because of the cosmetic changes, for example, one of the most noticeable is the remodelled rear tail light cluster. Big deal. They've kept the famous, or the infamous, rear buttresses. They've changed the side windows. At the front, they've become rimless. At the back, they've extended the glass on the outside, but it's still masked on the inside, so it hasn't improved the rearward vision. They've added the new 4-litre engine under the bonnet, which puts up 223 brake horsepower, giving an even smoother, and if you like, more effortless drive, certainly with the new automatic gearbox. They spent a fair bit of money tarting up the interior. A smart new facelift, for example, complete with trip computer and a posh new in-car entertainment system. But all in all, pretty small beer. When you remember that Ford have now cancelled the proposed F-Type, this car has to carry Jaguar's sporting and grand touring image for a long time to come. The strange thing is, it does it rather well. Despite its age, it provides a superbly smooth and muscular ride. In traffic or congested situations, it's a pig to handle because of its immense length. What this car craves above all is space to stretch its legs. Well, we won't unfortunately find that space just here, not quite yet anyway. This is the new racing circuit of Catalonia just outside Barcelona that's going to replace the old Spanish Formula One circuit at Jerez in the deep south. Not quite finished, as you can see. They claim it will be in a couple of months from now. It's 4.74 kilometres long precisely. It winds through these natural low hills here, so it provides the drivers with an interesting undulating circuit to drive on, as well as giving all kinds of excellent and safe vantage points for the spectators to watch the action. This is the end of the main straight, and by the time the Formula One cars reach here, they'll certainly be doing 200 miles an hour before they brake fiercely to go into that lovely combined right and left-hander winding away up the hill there. So it should become an exciting new addition to the European racing scene, as well as being, of course, far more accessible than the old circuit at Jerez. And when the Formula One circus descends on this place in earnest in September for the Spanish Grand Prix, it should draw after it a huge crowd of spectators from all over Europe, perhaps even from the UK. But before then, of course, the drivers will have faced some other very unfamiliar bends in a very familiar setting, because during the winter, the old sweeping curves at Silverstone have been totally reshaped to make it safer for the cars and drivers and more interesting for the spectators. Tiffany Dell's been along there to cast his driver's eye over these new bends. He chose another rather interesting Jaguar to do it in.
2 years ago, I tested Jaguar's Le Mans winning car, the XJR9, on the super-fast Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone, although the pouring rain meant that speeds were kept well down. It was a little drier this spring when I had the opportunity to put the Jaguar Sport development of that Le Mans car through its paces around a much modified and somewhat slower Silverstone. Called the XJR15, there'll only ever be 50 made, a limited edition collector's dream costing £500,000 each. And they're to be raced in special support events at 3 of this year's Grand Prix. This is the BIM Motorsport entry that I'll be driving in that series. Bought as an investment by a couple of enthusiasts. So what have they got for their money? Well, the chassis is a monocoque made of the very latest high-tech carbon Kevlar composite construction, clad in these beautifully sculptured carbon fibre body panels.